the impact of war is not only short term, but it has various dimensions in terms of human security, and also Afghanistan's natural habitat has also been disturbed due to continuous warfare.
Hi viewers, welcome to the gist and welcome to StratNewsGlobal. I'm Ishwarya, and today I have with me Dr. Anchita Borthakur. She's a researcher at the Chintan Research Foundation, and her area of interest is South Asia, but she focuses mainly on Pakistan and Afghanistan. So, welcome, Anchita. Welcome to the show.
Thank you
Uh,
very much. Thank you for
so
having me.
today we're going to talk about her recent paper, which talks about environmental casualties of war. So before we dive deep into the contents of the paper, I just want to ask you. You recently wrote about the toll that war takes on the environment in a region. So, what are some of the immediate and like if you can explain to us what some of the immediate effects are of war and also some of the long-standing ones?
Thank you very much, Aishwarya. Actually, my research was mainly focused on Afghanistan, so I will answer it based on that. Uh, Afghanistan, as a country that has been suffering from more than 40 years, it has experienced war. The human toll of war has been covered by most of the analysts. However, the extensive environmental degradation that has been going on in Afghanistan has not been covered by most of the researchers. So it can be seen that following 9/11 incident, when the US, with its Operation Enduring Freedom, it entered Afghanistan, they until the time they withdraw from Afghanistan, more than 85,000 bombs have been dropped on the Afghan soil. So the amount of environmental damage those bombs might have caused to Afghanistan's natural resources, be it the infrastructure, water, land, is even beyond human imagination. And another point that I would like to mention is that it is not just the short term impacts, which is definitely human casualties, will come under it. However, the long term impacts of war is also immense. It has destructed Afghanistan's agricultural production. Secondly, the soil has become contaminated. Water, Afghanistan has become a water scarce country. And along with that, Afghanistan's air has polluted. Kabul was once one of the most clean. Kabul has experienced clean air, I think, before the war uh, emerged in the country. However, after 2001, the Kabul became one of the most polluted cities in the world. So the impact of war is not only short term, but it has various dimensions in terms of human security, and also Afghanistan's natural habitat has also been disturbed due to continuous warfare.
Right. So, can you sort of explain a bit in detail, like you're talking about changes, like especially something like agriculture? I think if you can explain about how agriculture and water have been affected, or how the process has been, where we stand today in terms of levels.
Agriculture is the backbone of the Afghan society. For example, more than 80%, 17 to 80% of the population, they are dependent on agriculture in Afghanistan. And however, years of war that has destructed the entire agricultural infrastructure of the country. For example, even when bombardment it stopped, the soil that was once fertile, it no more been able to, those yields, the crop yields, they are no more, the land is not fertile enough to accommodate that. And because we can understand that the as the land poison due to the explosive, in order to that land doesn't recover easily. and because of that the entire agricultural ecosystem it gets damaged due to war. Along with that, Afghanistan has traditional irrigation system, which is basically known as the Courage or Kanat system. So, due to heavy bombardments, even there were destruction in this Courage or the Kanat system. And along with that, I mean, entire water, Afghanistan has now become a water scarce country in the world. And it has been another, very recently, an NGO named Mercy Crops. Mercy Crops has came up with an report that probably Kabul will become the first capital in the world which where there will be no water in the next 5 years. So it is a very important point, as and in case of Afghanistan it is not only that the Afghanistan, the Kabul is a water scarce, the country is water scarce, Afghanistan. Along with scarcity of water, contaminated water is another problem in Afghanistan. So even in case of Kabul, more than it has been reported that more than 80% of the Kabul's groundwater has been contaminated. So it's I mean the toll on entire agricultural infrastructure is massive in terms of Afghanistan. And it also it is along with this water scarcity and then agricultural production, another problem that the Afghan farmers they are facing at present is that due to they have scarcity of water, they are now planting more most of the time poppy cultivation or opium. It has even encouraged Afghan farmers to grow more poppy because poppy is water restive. And along with this, of course, it is lucrative. Because of which the entire this destruction in the agricultural infrastructure has promoted the Afghan farmers to grow poppy, and now it is not only a health hazard for Afghanistan, it has regional implications. So the war, climate change, and then its impact on human security, and along with this entire consequences on regional, even countries, is massive. So it is all interlinked.
Right. Actually, that sounds very concerning. But just to hold the effects for 1 minute and understand, you were mentioning since 2001. Is this something that uh, has the crisis begun in 2001? Like when we're talking about environmental impacts, or is it because can you explain when this degradation, or if certain approximate timeline as to when this degradation of environment really began, when the after effects of conflicts were reflecting on its environment?
Afghanistan's environment actually, it can be the environmental degradation. It can be dates back to historical interventions. For example, during the time of Anglo-Afghan War, even at that time there were extensive bombardments in the cities like Nangarhar and Kabul. And along with that, it was during the period of Third Anglo-Afghan War. And along with that, even during the Cold War period, at that time the US and USSR, their rivalry were seen in Afghanistan's agricultural sector, because they both wanted, they were planning for massive industrialization policies in Afghanistan. And so the problem started from there. However, it is also very important that the problem became more acute after the USSR's intervention in Afghanistan during the 1980s. And from that time, Afghanistan has been suffering from continuous warfare, be it war or internal conflicts. So, because of which the country is now in a process of extensive environmental degradation. And another important point that I would like to mention here is that even during the 1990s, Pakistan became nuclear, and Pakistan's entire this and the in Balochistan, when the nuclear testing was done by Pakistan, which borders Afghanistan's few provinces, and it therefore like Kandahar and Helmand. So the repercussion was felt in those areas as well.
So it can be seen that in terms of Afghanistan, this impact on environment was not something new. However, the problem became more acute after the Soviet intervention and the subsequent wars that the country has been experiencing since then.
Right. So, since we're talking about the entry of US post 1990s, does in your researches have you come across anything about military training itself and its impact on climate change?
I think military operations and military training are both two different aspects. I mean,
Correct.
yes, warfare is linked to environmental, ecological disruptions and environmental, but definitely it will have impacts on environment. However, in terms of military training or military exercises, it can be seen that most of these exercises they are planned much in advance and well choreographed, and most of the time it is spaced out, and it is how to mention, like it is done keeping in mind the emission target of an individual country. So therefore, military exercises or military training, the impact on the military exercises on environment is there, but it is in a much lesser scale as compared to military operations, because military operation doesn't have a time limit and it keeps on going unless the target is individual countries, they are done with their targets. So both are, I think, different thing. And however, the impact of warfare on environment is very much prominent, I believe.
Right. And what about landmines? This is something you've mentioned in your paper as well. What is the impact of landmines being used in warfare on environment and also on life?
In case of Afghanistan, I think one of the deadliest environmental threat the country is facing at present is due to the presence of thousands of landmines in the country. So Afghanistan is currently one of the heavily mined countries in the world. So, however, the problem of landmine is not something new to Afghanistan. It has been there since the time of the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. So, at that time, both the Mujahideen factions as well as the Soviet forces, they used the landmines. And the landmine that's scattered not only it's scattered around agricultural fields to mountain passes everywhere. There were landmines, and it can be I think I came across a report that in 2000, I think it's a report from 2000 and 2021, and it mentioned that in Afghanistan, out of its 34 provinces, only one province is free from landmines. Other 33 uh, provinces, they are experiencing this problem of landmines and other explosive remnants of war. So landmine is definitely a huge problem in the country. And according to there is an international organization called Hello Trust. According to them, it's like approximately 6.4 million Afghans, they are living under the threat of landmines even now. And it is estimated that one in in a month, it's like around 50 Afghans either lose their life or they are injured due to landmines. And along with that, most of these casualties, they are children. More than 90% of this, the people who suffer are children, because they unintentionally step into all those landmines because they play around in the field, and suddenly they step into the landmines, it got bursted. And probably that's why many Afghans, they have lost their life or even got injured in the process. So yes, landmine is a big problem in the country. And there was another, if I remember correctly, then another United Nations, I think United Nations mission, action missions, or something like mine action services, according to their report published in December last year. And they said that more than 45,000 Afghan civilians have lost their life from 1989 to until now, because of the violence, because of this landmine burst. So it's a massive issue in terms of Afghanistan. And another important factor is that the World Health Organization, they once stated that if Afghan agricultural fields are cleared of landmines, then sometimes in at least some areas, the agricultural productivity can be, 200 times more in certain areas of Afghanistan. So it's the
So are there
problem of
any measures
land.
to actually revive the agricultural economy, or are there any efforts underway locally or even internationally to address these long-term impacts? Not just landmines obviously being one of them, but all of these effects that you said, of whether it's soil, whether it's agriculture, whether it's water. Are there any effects locally or even internationally being taken uh, to address this issue?
In terms of Afghanistan, it can be seen that during the previous government, before the Taliban takeover, at that time, yes, the previous Republican government, they have undertaken several projects with the help of the international communities. And it can be, I think, various times the former president, not Ashraf Ghani, the previous one, Hamid Karzai, he has came up, he was very vocal about the impact of war on Afghanistan's climate. And therefore, at that time, during both Ashraf Ghani's and Hamid Karzai's regimes, at that time, various projects have been taken up by the concerned government along with the international community. Unfortunately, with the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan on 15th August 2021, from that time, the sanctions were imposed on Afghanistan. So after that, all most of these projects have been suspended since then. And along with that, with the newly with Trump administration's new funding restrictions and also suspension of USAID operations in Afghanistan, all these have also contributed immensely, and it has a negative impact on Afghanistan, because now most of the national organization which have been doing, especially in terms of landmine, I'd like to mention, they were doing this mine clearing of mines and demining activities. Now they don't have money to continue with their operations, and because of which now many of these national organizations are in the process of totally close down their missions. And so these are very important, I think, factors. However, at the same time, I'd like to mention that in terms of Taliban has also now, while interacting with the Western countries, they are also urging the international community to uh, you know give them funding, at least in terms of dealing with the climate crisis in Afghanistan. And interestingly, last year in the month of February, if not mistaken, the Taliban has also organized a conference in the Nangarhar University on climate change. It is very important because Nangarhar is the place where, in the year 2017, the US has detonated the so-called mother of all bombs in the province. So it's a, and in that particular, I mean, province, and also in that particular place, and the Nangarhar University actually organized that particular event on climate change with the support of the Taliban. So Taliban is doing it, but at the same time, without the support of the international community, it will be I mean, unlikely or impossible for the Afghan government to deal with this massive crisis.
Correct. That uh, that makes sense. Just one last question, since we are seeing so many wars currently going on, do you see any similarities or similar environmental patterns in any of the other in the current ongoing wars, whether we're talking about West Asia or we're talking about Russia, Ukraine? Are you seeing any similar patterns?
Actually, to be honest, I do not want to go into specificity of all this crisis because I have not done my research on it. But at the same time, I mean, definitely the impact on environment will be massive. It is, I mean, probably other researchers who works on in this area, probably in the Middle East or even Ukraine, Russia, they probably will be more acquainted with answering to this question. But what I would like to mention is that when this kind of conflict that takes place in a country, in a region, then some of the main parameters of some human security issues are deprioritized. I mean, for example, environmental security, be it environmental security or other non traditional security issues, they are mostly deprioritized. So, definitely, in terms of Gaza and also other countries, Russia and Ukraine, the environmental impact of war will be there. But how far it will be an interesting area to look into, and definitely, I am also looking forward to check on it in the future, do my further research.
Right. Thank you so much for talking to us today on The Gist. And thank you, viewers, for staying with us through this conversation. We'll be back with more interesting conversations with experts. And thank you so much for watching.